We are now joined by Shaeera Kalla from Pay the Grants Coalition. Shaeera, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the hashtag Pay the Grants Coalition has been trying to engage the government, including the Presidency, Treasury and the Social Development and Sassa for months. So what's their reasoning around this?
They haven't given us any justification for the termination of these grants. And in fact, we've been trying to meet with them for a year now, for months. We've been sending letters, we've been trying to engage. They don't seem to be interested in any engagement with civil society. And we can see that this termination has an impact on millions of people. 6.9 million people who are directly benefiting from this COVID grant who had no income. And then also the caregivers whose grants were terminated last year in November. And that was 7 million caregivers who cannot access the COVID grant because they do access the child support grant. And the child support grant is not for them, it's for the children. Mm-hmm. So the logic that our government seems to be using in terms of social relief is completely unjust. And they haven't given any reasoning for how they've structured these programs.
So what are you proposing the government does? Because millions of South Africans certainly cannot afford to go hungry. And I would imagine, on the other hand, the government using this pandemic and the devastating impact thereof to redirect funds to other sectors. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen that government has actually decreased funds for grants in this past year from the beginning of the year in real terms. And that is very worrying because we see that the cost of living is constantly increasing. In fact, the price of food, particularly this month in April, last month in April, was at the highest ever recorded, according to one of the research groups called the PMBEJD. And they have been noting the effects of these price increases on hunger. We've also seen the NIDS-CRAM data that showed us that 37% of people ran out of money to buy food. That was last year. And the new results are going to be coming out now next week. So anecdotally, we can tell you that hunger and child hunger have been increasing. So our demands are quite clear that the government needs to extend this COVID grant. They need to increase the amount because 350 is way below the food poverty line of 585 Rand, which is the bare minimum that this amount should be. And they also need to expand these grants to include caregivers. And lastly, what we've seen with the administration of this grant has been completely despicable and inexcusable. Sassa has been using its facilities in a way that do not carry out the urgency of these grants. We've seen hundreds of people line up, sleep in the cold, and go in early in the morning to stand in lines to collect these grants, only to be turned away because the system may have shut down or because the post offices have been out of money. And this is unacceptable. These people really have dignity, and their dignity needs to be respected in this crucial time and this time of suffering in this pandemic.
And speaking of dignity and whether dignity is respected or not, by being granted 350 Rand, and you and I know that 350 Rand is nothing, it's very little to cater for all the needs of South Africans. So has there been any research conducted? Is there any data which proves, or rather which shows the real impact of what 350 Rand can actually do for the citizens of South Africa?
Yeah, though the amount is very small and shamefully small, actually, because like I said, it's below the food poverty line, which in itself is a very contested and conservative amount of what people actually need to survive. It has had a very positive impact. People have managed to feed their families. Of course, it doesn't bear in mind the nutritional value of the meals that are being fed. But I mean, when you have nothing, and when the standards are so low, even pre-pandemic, we're looking at a situation and a context in South Africa where we have the highest wealth concentration in the world. And beyond that, 70% of our population was living below 1,260 Rand a month per person. So we don't have a very high standard to hold ourselves to. And people are actually being abused. And what's going on with this grant is very, very unjust and actually unconstitutional.
So you just said that you are calling for the grants to be extended. So do you have the time frames, or are you also calling for the grants to be here to stay, or to be here on a permanent basis? And if so, would you also call for the grants to be used as a way of building towards a universal basic income grant?
Yes, so you actually hit the nail on the head. That's what I was getting in wanting to answer this very important question you posed. So we don't see the COVID grant as an end in itself. We see it as a bridge to a basic income guarantee. And why we say guarantee is because we believe in everyone's moral and social right to the economy. So we don't see this as a handout or as charity or as a favor to people. We see this as people's right. We know that in South Africa, unemployment is structural. Full employment is a myth. It doesn't exist in this country and in most of the developing world. So we need to really rally behind this call for protection, for permanent social protection. And what we're saying is that until we don't have a basic income guarantee and a permanent social protection system, we need to ensure that these grants are extended. And the sooner we can have that system, the more sustainable these efforts will be.
All right, Shaeera, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts on this matter. That was Shaeera Kalla from the Pay the Grants Coalition.